As the night falls and the world drifts into sleep, those on the night shift face fears that the light cannot chase away. Do you dare to listen to the chilling tales that unfold in the stillest hours, when the darkness is more than just a companion? First story. All right, so this happened about a year ago when I was working as a night security guard for this massive office building downtown. It's one of those places where everything shuts down at 5 p.m., and by the time I clock in, it's just me and the cameras for the rest of the night. Honestly, it was a pretty sweet gig. Nothing ever really happened. Until that one week. It was a Wednesday, I remember, because the cleaning crew had left early. I was about halfway through my shift, just sipping coffee and flipping through the security feeds. Everything was normal until I noticed something weird on one of the cameras on the 7th floor. There was this dark figure in the hallway. Now, I'm used to shadows and weird camera glitches, so I didn't think much of it. I figured it was just a trick of the lighting or something. But then, it moved. Slowly, like someone walking down the hall. Problem is, nobody was supposed to be in the building. I radioed it in, but the dispatcher just shrugged it off. Said maybe it was one of the employees who stayed late and forgot to check out. I thought, yeah, that makes sense, and went back to watching the feed. But something about it didn't sit right with me. I kept an eye on that hallway for the next hour, and the figure was gone. Nothing. I figured I was just tired, maybe seeing things. But about an hour later, I see it again. This time on the 5th floor, 2 floors closer to where I am in the security office. It was the same dark shape, but it was clearer now, and it wasn't moving like a person. More like floating, gliding. I don't know how to explain it, but it wasn't normal. I started to get this weird feeling in my gut. You know that sensation when you're alone, but it feels like someone's watching you? That's when I started getting really uneasy. I decided to do a walkthrough just to clear my head and maybe catch whoever was messing around. I took the elevator up to the 5th floor, flashlight in hand, and walked through the hall. Nothing. I even checked the offices. Everything was locked up tight. But the whole time, I couldn't shake that feeling that I wasn't alone. I went back to the security office and sat down, checked the cameras again, and there it was, on the 3rd floor now, just standing at the end of the hallway, facing the camera. I zoomed in, but it was still just a dark figure. No details, no face. I could feel my heart pounding, but I didn't want to freak myself out, so I told myself it was some glitch in the camera system. But the next time I looked, it was on the 2nd floor, then the lobby, and then my feed went black. All the cameras cut out at once. I stared at the monitor, waiting for it to come back, and when it did, my stomach dropped. The figure was standing right outside the security office door. I swear my whole body went cold. I didn't hear anyone coming. No footsteps. No sound at all. I froze, staring at the screen, not sure what to do. And then the door handle started to turn. Slowly. I jumped up, yanked the door open, but no one was there. The hallway was empty, completely empty. But I swear on my life, I felt something standing there, watching me. I didn't finish my shift that night. I left the building and never went back. I didn't even bother collecting my last paycheck. Whatever that thing was, it wasn't human, and it definitely wasn't a glitch. Second story. I used to work the night shift at a 24-hour gas station just outside of town. It's one of those places that's dead quiet after 10 p.m. Most nights, I'd only see a handful of people. Truckers, the occasional traveler, maybe some locals grabbing smokes. Easy money, I thought. But there was this one night that changed everything. It was a little after 2 a.m., and the store was completely empty. I was behind the counter, scrolling through my phone, when I noticed something odd on the security cameras. We had 4 feeds, one inside, one pointed at the pumps, and 2 that covered the lot. The one showing the far end of the lot, near the dumpster, flickered a bit. Normally I'd brush it off, but something caught my eye. There was a person standing just outside the camera's view, right on the edge of the lot where the lights barely reach. At first, I thought maybe someone was just wandering by, but they weren't moving. They were just standing there. I watched for a few minutes, hoping they'd just pass through, but they didn't. It was like they were staring straight at the store, at me, even though I couldn't make out any details. Just a shadowy figure. After about 10 minutes of this, I started getting uncomfortable. I kept glancing at the other cameras. Still nobody inside, and no cars had pulled up to the pumps. But when I checked the lot feed again, the figure was gone. I let out a breath, thinking it was over. But then, the back door alarm went off. Now, this back door led to a small storage room, and it's always locked. I knew I hadn't opened it, and no one else had been in the store for hours. My heart was racing as I went to check the door. The storage room was dark, and the door was cracked open just enough to set off the alarm. I pushed it open and flashed my light inside. Nothing. Just shelves of stock and cleaning supplies. I pulled the door shut, locked it, and hurried back to the counter. But when I sat down, I froze. The figure was back, this time standing by the pumps, right in the middle of the lot. They were facing the store again, not moving, just standing there. I grabbed the phone and called my manager, telling him someone was hanging around the lot. As I was on the phone, I looked back at the camera, and the figure was gone again. I told him it must have been some weirdo messing with me, but he said he'd come by and check it out. As soon as I hung up, the power went out. Everything, lights, pumps, cameras, all of it shut down. The store was plunged into darkness, and the only light came from my phone screen. I grabbed my flashlight and pointed it at the front windows. My heart was pounding, and I could barely keep my hands steady. I shined the light toward the lot, but no one was there. Then I heard it. The faint sound of footsteps inside the store. They were slow, deliberate, like someone was walking up and down the aisles, just out of sight. I called out, "Hello? Is someone there?" No response, but the footsteps kept going, getting closer. I backed up against the counter, my flashlight aimed at the aisles, but I couldn't see anyone. The sound of footsteps stopped for a second, then started again, right behind me. I spun around, but no one was there. My chest was tight, and I could feel my pulse in my ears. I didn't wait for my manager. I grabbed my keys, locked the front door, and bolted to my car. By the time my manager showed up, the power had come back on. The cameras were up, the lights were on, and everything looked perfectly normal. He told me the footage from the cameras showed nothing strange, no figure, no one walking through the lot. But I know what I saw, and I know what I heard. I quit the next morning. No job is worth going back there after that. Third story. This happened last year when I was working overtime at the office. I had a big project due, and I figured staying late would let me knock it out without distractions. The office was usually pretty busy during the day, but after 6 p.m. it was dead quiet. Most of my coworkers would never stick around after hours, so it was just me, alone, in this big empty building. At first it was peaceful. I had my headphones on, grinding away at my desk, just zoning out. But around 10 p.m., I started getting this weird feeling, like I wasn't alone. You know that prickly sensation on the back of your neck, like someone's watching you? At first, I brushed it off, thinking I was just tired from staring at the screen for too long. But then, I heard it. A soft shuffle, like footsteps, coming from down the hall. I pulled off my headphones, thinking maybe the cleaning crew was here early, but when I listened closer, the footsteps stopped. Weird, but I went back to work. About 20 minutes later, I heard it again. This time, it was louder, like someone was walking slowly, but deliberately. I got up from my desk and peeked into the hallway. No one. The lights in the hall were dim since they're on a timer, so the whole place had this eerie, half-lit vibe. I called out, "Hello? Anyone here?" Nothing. I figured maybe it was the building settling or something, but I couldn't shake the unease. I went back to my desk, but now I was hyper-aware of every little sound. The creaks, the hum of the HVAC system, the distant clinks from the elevator. Around midnight, I was packing up to leave when I caught movement out of the corner of my eye. One of the office doors down the hall was slowly swinging shut. I froze. No one else was supposed to be on this floor, and that door had been wide open all night. I grabbed my stuff and went to check it out, hoping maybe someone had stayed late and just didn't say anything. I opened the door and peeked inside. The lights were off, and the office was empty, except for the desks and chairs. No sign of anyone. I backed out and was about to head for the elevator when I heard the footsteps again. This time coming from behind me, down the same hallway I'd just checked. They were faster now, like someone was walking toward me. I turned around and stared down the hall, but it was empty. My heart was pounding, and the whole place suddenly felt way colder. I swear it was like the air itself was heavy, pressing down on me. I started walking fast toward the elevator, trying to stay calm. But as I reached the doors, I heard something else, a whisper. So faint, I almost thought I was imagining it. I couldn't make out the words, but it was definitely a voice, coming from the direction of the office I'd just checked. I jabbed the elevator button and waited, my pulse racing. The doors finally opened, and I jumped inside, hitting the button for the lobby. The doors were closing when I glanced out into the hallway one last time. And there, standing at the far end, was a figure. Just standing there, motionless, watching me. I didn't get a good look at it. It was too dark, but it wasn't shaped right, like it was too tall or too thin or... I don't know. It didn't look human. I bolted out of the building the second the elevator hit the lobby. I didn't stop until I was in my car, speeding home. The next day, I asked around and nobody had stayed late. No one had seen or heard anything unusual either. I've never stayed late at the office since. Whatever was in that building with me that night, I don't want to know. Fourth story. I used to work the night shift at a small 24-hour convenience store just off the highway. It wasn't a bad gig. Quiet, no customers to deal with after 2 a.m., and I could put my feet up while the world slept. The only thing I didn't like was the eerie vibe the store gave off in the dead of night. The hum of the fluorescent lights, the emptiness of the aisles, and the silence outside always felt wrong. It started about 2 months into my job. I was stocking shelves around 3 a.m. when I heard the ding of the front door. I turned to the counter, expecting to see someone coming in, but the door was closed. No one had entered. At first, I brushed it off, figured the wind or a faulty sensor had triggered it. But then, every night after that, like clockwork at exactly 3 a.m., the door would chime. I never saw anyone, never heard footsteps, just the ding. One night, out of curiosity, I reviewed the security footage to see if I could catch whatever was causing it. But when I played the tape back, there was nothing. Just me stocking shelves. And at 3:00 a.m. the door chimed, but it didn't move. It was like the sound had come from nowhere. I tried to ignore it, but every night the door kept chiming at the exact same time. One night, I decided to confront it. When the clock hit 2:58 a.m., I stood by the door, waiting for the sound. Sure enough, at 3 a.m., the ding echoed through the empty store. But this time, the door did open, just a crack. Cold air rushed in from outside. I peered through the crack, expecting to see some prankster, but there was no one. No car in the lot. No footsteps in the gravel, just darkness. I pulled the door open all the way, and that's when I saw it. About 50 feet away, standing at the edge of the parking lot, was a figure. They were just standing there. I couldn't make out any details. It was too dark, and the figure was too far away, but I could feel it watching me. Even though it didn't move, I knew it was staring right at me. I froze. My heart pounded in my chest. I tried to speak, to shout something, but the words caught in my throat. Suddenly, the figure began walking toward me. Slow, deliberate steps. The kind of walk you see in nightmares, where no matter how fast you try to run, they always catch up. I backed into the store, slamming the door shut. I rushed behind the counter and grabbed the phone to call the police, but the line was dead. The lights inside the store flickered, buzzing louder than usual. Then, there was a knock on the door. Slow, rhythmic. Knock, knock, knock. I didn't move. I couldn't. The knocking stopped, replaced by a scraping sound. It was coming from the windows, like nails dragging across the glass. I peeked out from behind the counter and saw the figure standing right outside, its face pressed against the window. Except, it didn't have a face. It was just a blank, smooth surface where a face should have been. No eyes, no mouth, nothing. The scraping continued, louder now, as if it was trying to claw its way inside. I backed into the storage room, barricading myself behind boxes of chips and soda, praying the door would hold. For hours I sat there, listening to the sound of scraping and knocking. At some point I must have passed out because when I woke up, the sun was rising and everything was quiet again. The door was still locked, and there was no sign of the figure. No scratches on the windows, no evidence of what had happened. But I quit that night shift job the very next day. I told my manager everything, and he just nodded, like he'd heard it all before. "You're not the first," he said, his voice low. "That's why we can never keep anyone on the night shift for long." I never went back. But sometimes, late at night, I'll hear the ding of a door in the distance, and I'll feel like I'm being watched again, like it's still out there, waiting for me. Fifth story. I took the night shift at the museum because I thought it would be easy. Sit in a security booth, drink coffee, and watch a bunch of dusty exhibits. I wasn't a fan of art, or history for that matter, but the pay was good, and the museum was quiet at night. Just how I liked it. But then, quiet can sometimes be a problem. It leaves space for your imagination to creep in. Or worse, for something else. My first couple of nights were uneventful, just as I expected. I'd walk the halls, check the exhibits, make sure no one had broken in. Then, around 2 a.m., I'd sit back in my chair and watch the security monitors. The place was massive, 4 floors of historical exhibits, from ancient Egyptian artifacts to medieval weaponry and, of course, the taxidermy room on the first floor. The stuffed animals always gave me the creeps, but I tried to ignore them. I was alone after all. It was on my 4th night when I first heard the footsteps. I was doing my rounds on the 3rd floor, near the ancient history exhibit, when I heard them. Slow, deliberate footsteps echoing from somewhere down the hall. I stopped dead in my tracks, holding my breath. At first I figured it was just another guard, but then I remembered I was the only one working that night. I called out, "Hello? Anyone there?" My voice echoed down the empty corridor, but there was no response. The footsteps stopped. I waited a minute, maybe 2, but all I could hear was the faint hum of the building's ventilation system. I chalked it up to nerves and headed back to the security room. But then it happened again the next night. The same footsteps, only this time they sounded closer, like someone was walking just behind me. I spun around, but the hall was empty. I even checked the security cameras. Nothing. I was starting to feel like I was losing it. On my 7th night, things escalated. It was close to 3 a.m. when I did my usual patrol, heading through the ancient civilization's wing. There's a huge statue there, some ancient god with wings and a scythe. Maybe Sumerian or Babylonian, I don't know. But as I walked past it, I noticed something I hadn't seen before. The statue's head was tilted slightly, as if it were looking down at me. I froze. I'd passed that statue 100 times, and its head was always facing straight ahead. I felt a cold shiver crawl up my spine. There was no way it had moved. It had to be my imagination, right? But then I heard it again, the footsteps. Except this time they weren't distant. They were right behind me, and they weren't human. It sounded like hooves, heavy and sharp, clacking against the marble floor. I slowly turned around, my heart hammering in my chest. The statue, the one that had been towering over me just a second ago, was gone. I blinked, convinced I was hallucinating. I walked the entire wing, frantically checking the cameras. No sign of the statue. But as I rounded a corner, I found it. It was standing at the entrance to the next exhibit, a new position, like it had been waiting for me. Its head was now fully turned toward me, and its hand, its stone hand, was outstretched, pointing directly at me. I backed away, heart pounding, not daring to take my eyes off it. That's when I heard a faint whisper. At first it was unintelligible, like wind passing through the cracks in the walls. But then it grew louder, more distinct. "Leave." I spun around, but there was no one there. I turned back to the statue, but now it was closer. Not by much, but enough to make me sick to my stomach. It was moving. When I wasn't looking, it was moving. I ran. I didn't care if I was overreacting. I didn't care if someone would laugh at me later. I just ran straight back to the security room and locked the door behind me. I checked the monitors again, half expecting to see that statue standing in front of the camera. But there was nothing. The halls were empty, just like they always were. For a moment, I thought I might actually be going insane. But then the taxidermy room caught my eye. One of the animals, a large lion, was no longer in its case. It was on the floor, paws stretched out, facing the door, as if it had been stalking something, or someone. I switched cameras, scanning the room in a panic. The bears were gone from their usual spot too, and the eagle, which had been mounted high on the wall, was now perched on the front desk. The animals were moving. I slammed my hand on the desk, trying to catch my breath, trying to rationalize what I was seeing. And then the door to the security room creaked. I whipped around just as the door opened slightly, just a crack, and I heard those footsteps again. Hooves, slow and steady, approaching me. I locked the door, but the sound kept coming closer. I pressed my back against the wall, staring at the door, expecting it to burst open at any second. The whispers returned, louder this time, a chorus of voices all speaking at once. "Leave. Leave. Leave." I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed my keys, bolted down the hallway, and didn't stop until I was outside the museum, gasping for air in the cold night. The next morning I quit. I don't know what's going on in that place, but whatever it is, it's not human. Statues don't move. Taxidermy animals don't come to life. At least they shouldn't. But every now and then, late at night, I'll drive past the museum on my way home. And sometimes, just out of the corner of my eye, I'll see that statue, standing in the window, watching me. Thank you all for listening to my stories. If you enjoyed them, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any future videos.